Okay, so take out your polynomials factoring review worksheet, and like I said, a blank copy of this is on the Google Classroom as well as my work solutions. We're going to go through this, and this is essentially going to be the same order that the quiz will be. So your very first question on the quiz will be this one here, and is all the question will say is determine the GCF or write the GCF. So I will do this first one, and then you will do this one. So between a 4 and an 8, the biggest number you could divide out of both of these would be the 4. Then you're going to look for the x's. Are common, and you're going to take out the lowest power of x's, which would be x to the 3. Then you're going to say the y's are common, and you're going to take the lowest power of y, which will be y to the 6. Can you please factor this one for me? Sorry, not factor, just determine the GCF, and then I will pick somebody to give me the GCF. So between a 10, 15, and a 5, what number? And then what variables would you take out? So get that done. Ainsley, you're done? Juan, are you done? Okay. Okay, so for this one, Serena, what do you have for the GCF of those three terms? Say that again. 5AB. Yep. So between a 10, 15, and a 5, you could take out a 5, 1A and 1B. Why did you not say, Serena, C? That's right. It has to be common in all three terms in order for you to factor out that variable. So that would be the GCF of 5AB. Okay, your second question then on the quiz would be factor the following expressions. I won't say the method, but this is going to be factoring by a GCF. So you would look at this and you would say, okay, between a 15 and a 10, you could take out a 5. And remember, if it starts with a negative, it would be a -5 you're factoring out. Then you would look at your x's, and x to the 3, x to the 2, you'd factor out an x squared. With your y's, y to the 1, y to the 2, the lowest power would be y to the 1. Whatever your GCF is, you are then going to do your two division bars, because there's two terms. So division bar over each term. And you'd write -5x squared y, -5x squared y. Remember that the GCF goes in front of your bracket, and the answer goes in the bracket. So -15 divided by -5 would be 3. X to the 3 over x to the 2, you subtract the exponents, that would give you x, and y's would cancel. This one here, two negatives will give you a positive, but if you needed to, you could just take out your calculators and type in -10 divided by -5, right? Like if you, let's say you freeze and you're not sure. So two negatives would give you a positive, and it would be +2. The x squares would cancel, and when you subtract the exponents on the y's, you'd be left with y to the 1. That would be your answer, and that would be worth 2 marks. Essentially, you're getting 1 mark for the GCF, which is one of your factors, and 1 mark for your second factor. Remember, if you really want to, on the test tomorrow, to check if you've done it correctly, off to the side, you could redistribute this back in, and you will get the original expression. Please do this one for me. So 5x squared, so 3 terms. It's going to be factored by a GCF. Juan, what will the GCF be? 5x. That is one of your factors. Angel, do you want to read me what you got in the bracket? Yes, x minus 2y minus 4z. Because these x's will cancel, those x's would cancel. If you want to, 5 divided by 5 is 1. You could put that, or you don't need that invisible 1. And then you would box that in. 2 marks you would get for this, 1 per factor. Okay, then you're going to see questions like this. This is what we did yesterday. So this, remember, was actually lesson 2 in the book, but we do it at the end. So I want you to look at this first one, see if you're able to factor it. So remember, you should be seeing something with brackets, and that should hopefully clue you in. When you see 2 brackets, x plus 5 and x plus 5, they're the same. What we could do is we could factor out that bracket. So I could write an x plus 5. Once that's factored out, the remaining bracket is your second factor. And Xavier, what would be the remaining bracket, or the second factor? That's right, 3x minus 7. All right, you do yours. This one should honestly be done in under 30 seconds, right? If you see the 2 brackets, you remember really quickly, you should do this one. Aiden, could you give me one of the factors? X minus 3. So he gave me the common factor. And then McLeod, what would be the second factor? Yes, 2a plus 3b. That would go together. Again, 1 mark per factor. Your answer has 2 different factors. What was it called when you have 4 terms? Remember? It is called group factoring. You don't need to know that like on the test. It wouldn't say what method of factoring is this. But you know in 20-1 they'll say, okay, we're going to group factor. And this is what they would mean. So remember when you have 4 terms, you split your 4 terms in half. You look at the first 2 terms and you say, what can I factor out of an x squared and a 15x? And that would be an x. There's essentially a 1 in front of here, so the number would be a 1x. That goes in front of your bracket, and the answer of the division goes in the bracket. So x squared divided by x is x minus 15. You then look at your last 2 terms, and you say, what can you take out of a 4 and a 60? What would that answer be? Yeah, the GCF between a 4 and a 60 is 4. And take out your calculators and you'd verify. You would type in 60 divided by 4 just to see if it works. And it would. What would the sign of the 4 be, though? Negative, yes. That guy there will dictate that it's going to be a negative 4 that you'll be factoring out. And then you would say, okay, negative 4 divided by negative 4 gives you 1, which 1x. A positive and a negative would give you a negative. And 60 divided by 4 is 15. Once you get to this stage, you are essentially where we were up here, okay? So make sure if the brackets are the same, you did it correctly. Michaela, what would one of your factors for your answer be? For this one here. X minus 15 is correct. Wale, do you know the other one? X minus 4. What's remaining goes in the second bracket. Remember, it doesn't matter the order of your brackets. You could have written x minus 4, that factor first, followed by x minus 15. It's up to you. All right, I'll get you to do this one. I'll set it up, then I'll just ask two different people for the factors. Okay, Kalita, do you have one of the factors done? Say that again, 1x plus 2 or 3? Are you guys getting this? Okay. So I might be getting something different, so I'll look at yours after, Kalita. Julius, what are you getting for one of your factors? So what would it be? 3x plus 1 is going to be one of your factors, which would be that guy. And then McKenna, what would be the other one? X plus 2. And that would be your two factors. So again, um, there'll be one of each type of these questions. So one set up in this method with the two brackets are already established, one where you have four terms and you need to group factor. Don't forget this negative, right? If there's a negative here, it's factoring out a -4. It's the one thing that students will sort of forget about. Then for these questions, just because we're studying right now, I've structured it the PSA 1, PSA 2, difference of squares. You won't know on the test. They'll all be scrambled together. So you're going to have to be able to distinguish between PSA 1, PSA 2, and difference of squares. Okay, so this first one, trinomial. The A value here is a 1. So this would be a PSA 1 question, or more formally, it's an inspection question. So you're looking for what gives you the product of 28 and the sum of -16. So you take the 28 and you say, what is everything that multiplies to 28? So 1 in 28, or -1, -28. 28 divided by 2 is 2 and 14, or -2, -14. If you could see the answer by inspection, you can stop, right? You don't have to continue dividing 28 by 3, 28 by 4. You don't have to do that. So if you see the answer by inspection, you stop. Ainsley, do you see what the answer is? Yes. This would sum to -16. And then you set up your two brackets, an x at the beginning of each bracket. One x will get a -2. Doesn't matter which one. And one bracket will get the -14. That would be your factored answer. Again, if you wanted to see if you were right, you could do the distributive property. So circle that first term and distribute it into the second bracket. So x times x is x squared. And you would get this answer once you gather your like terms together. Can you do this one? X squared plus 6x minus 27. So product of -27, sum of 6. I wouldn't even write down 1 in 27, right? Because it's going to come nowhere near 6. So 27 divided by 3 is 9. Remember that you're getting a product of a -27. So in order to do that, one of these values must be negative. And then the answer would be the two numbers that sum to 6. Erin, which would be the two answers that would sum to 6? Yes, these two here. So negative 3 and 9. So again, it doesn't matter which factor you say could be the x minus 3. The other one would be the x plus 9. They're both correct. Because if you expanded that, you would get the original expression here. Okay, then to make things slightly more complicated, you're going to be getting a question like this. And I believe one of these would be on the exam as well, and they're always usually on the final at the end of the year. Students will look at this question and they will say, this is a PSA2 or decomposition question because there's a 4 here. What you always must do, though, is say to yourself, can I turn this into a PSA 1? And how you would turn this into a PSA 1 is if you could divide out the 4 from each term. So this, you can actually first factor by GCF, and the GCF would be 4. If you divide each term by 4, what you would get, 4 divided by 4 is 1, x squared, minus 16 divided by 4 is 4, minus 20 divided by 4 is 5. So what you've just done, yes, what you've just done is you've taken out a GCF. This now you could factor by inspection, or this would be a PSA 1 question. So this would be a 3-mark question because at the end of the day you would get 3 factors. 4 is one of the factors, and then you would say, well, what would this be if I factored that? So product of negative 5, sum of negative 4, there's only 2 numbers that multiply to 5, which is 1 and 5. But to get a negative 5, it would need to look like this. When you sum them together, you'd get that one would be a 4, this would be a negative 4. So there's your answer, 1 and negative 5. You would then set up your 2 factors here, and one of your factors would be x plus 1. One would be x minus 5. And what can I not forget? The 4, your GCF. So bring that down, and you cannot forget that. That's why it'd be 3 marks. So it'd essentially be 1 mark for your GCF, which is a factor, 1 mark for the second factor, and your third factor. All right, you try this one. There's going to be a GCF. This is not going to be a PSA 2 question. Caleb B, do you have the 2 numbers that multiply to 10 and sum to negative 7? Did you get those? Like, what were the 2 numbers that multiply to 10? Yep, 2 and 5. Is it negative 2, negative 5, positive 2, positive 5? What would it be? Nope. It'd be negative for both because you need to get a negative 7 as a sum. So it would have to be negative 2 and negative 5. And that would be your answer. So one basic inspection question, one of these for 2 marks. Then there'd be an inspection or PSA 1 question that first you have to take a GCF out. and then you do inspection on it. And then I think you have two PSA 2 questions or decomposition. This is the one that students need to think about or that it's a little bit more work on. So let's just write this is called decomposition. And remember that you first look at this 2 and you say, can I turn this into a PSA 1? Can I divide this out by 2? And the answer is no. This middle term is going to give you an issue. So because you can't do this, that A value is a number other than 1, it's going to become a PSA 2. You are looking for what gives you the product of 12 and the sum of 7. Upon inspection, people would say, okay, that's easy, right? The two numbers that multiply to 12 add to 7 would be 3 and 4. And then remember, so you could watch up here, don't write this down. The mistake that students make, and this would get you 0 if you do this, they know that the answer is 3 and 4. So what they try to do is they try to set up two brackets, and they try to say that the two factors are x plus 3 and x plus 4. But there's an issue if we do this. And the issue is if you re-expand it, what is 1x times 1x? It's 1x squared. And we need to get a 2x squared, right? So you can't do this method that we did in PSA 1. So what you have to say to yourself is you say to yourself, okay, this method was called decomposition. It's always this middle term you decompose. Ask yourself, how do you get 7x's based on the answer? Well, 3x's plus 4x's. You could be strategic in how you place them. It doesn't matter. You could do 3x plus 4x or 4x plus 3x. But what number do you want next to the 2? Do you want the 3 there or do you want the 4? Like, which number do you want me to put first? The 4. I would put the 4, but you would get the same answer if you don't. So, okay, let's see. How do you get 7x's? 4x plus 3x. That's how you decompose 7x. Bring down this plus 6. Bring down this 2x squared. What sign do you want me to put in front of the 4? It's a positive. This is a positive 3 and a positive 4. So remember with PSA 2, you are going to get 4 terms, always. Once you get 4 terms, what is it called? Do you remember? Split it in half, and you group factor. Carly, what did you get as one of your factored answers? Mm-hmm. Yes. So she said x plus 2 first, and then she said her second factor was 2x plus 3. And again, it does not matter which order, which factor you list first. What I will do is I'm going to do one more with you because I want you to see how a negative would work. And then I'll give you a few minutes to do 2 more PSA 2s on your own because PSA 2, it's the one that's the most work. Remember, try to get rid of that 3. Can this 3 be a GCF? And it cannot, right? So you say, okay, my A value is not a 1. This is a PSA 2 question. Your product is negative 24. Your sum is negative 2. So again, you could write 1 and 24, but I'm not going to because I know it's not anywhere near 2. Then it would be 2 and 12. I'm not going to write that. 24 divided by 3. So you might write 3 and 8. 24 divided by 4 is 4 and 6. Remember, you are getting a negative 24. That means one of these values must be negative. Okay, and then you got to figure out which were the two numbers that summed to negative 2. Shaywa, what's the answer? Which are the two numbers that sum to negative 2? 4 and negative 6. Yep, right here. This one would sum to positive 2. This would sum to negative 2. So she said 4, and she said negative 6. You got to break down or decompose that negative 2x by your answer. How do you get negative 2x's? 4x's minus 6x's. Which one, though, the 4 or the 6, do you want me to place first? Because you've got a 3 here, the negative 6. That's what I'll do. But again, you get the same answer if you don't. So I'm going to write negative 6x plus 4x. Bring this down. Bring that down. You get your 4 terms. You split it in half. And you group factor. If you do it correctly, here's what you should get. Your two brackets, which would be the same, would be x minus 2. So that is one of your factors. And your other factor would be this. Okay, I will give you a few minutes. I want you to do these two. I'm going to come around just to see how many people are getting this. And then we'll review difference of squares. We'll talk about another sort of exam question you need to know. And then I'll give you like a practice worksheet. So I'll give you a few minutes to do those. Okay, so most of you are done, these two. So I'll give you the questions, or sorry, I'll give you the solutions. Remember that the work solutions are on the Google Classroom, so if you want to check your answers, the first one should be 5x plus 2 and x plus 1. That's one of your, those are the two factors. And then the bottom question should be 2x minus 1 and 6x minus 1. Is that what you guys got? Okay. And then again, if you didn't get those, when you're working on the worksheet, I will come around and I could help you with those. Let's continue with this review and flip your page. Okay, So what I just want you to mark on here, these last four, you guys, there's something called perfect squares, and I haven't taught perfect squares yet. I'm going to show you perfect squares on um, after the long weekend. So this one, these last four, you will not be doing these four, okay? What we're going to do is we're just going to do the difference of squares. So difference of squares, remember what you have to know of this, it's two terms. They must be separated by a minus. Okay, you've got two terms separated by a minus. I could take the square root of both of these terms, so this would be a difference of squares. You would set up your two brackets, and you would say, what is the square root of x squared? It is x. What is the square root of 64? It is 8. One of your factors is going to be a positive, and one will be a negative. So difference of squares should be the easiest ones or the fastest that you will be factoring. Can you please factor this one by a difference of squares? And then I'll pick two people for the answer. So again, say to yourself, two terms separated by a minus. Square root each term. Tristan, what is one of your factors? 2x minus 5. And Maria, what's the other one? Yes. 2x minus 5, 2x plus 5. Again, it does not matter which factor you list first. So you're going to get one, I call these like basic difference of squares questions. And then there's going to be one that's going to be worth 3 marks instead of 2, which would be these two. So what happens here is you say to yourself two terms separated by a minus. You go through and you try to square root 2, and you can't, right? You can't take the square root of 50 either. It would give you irrational numbers. So what you have to do to make it a perfect square, what's the first thing you'd have to do? GCF. You got to get rid of that 2. If you factor out a 2, what you are left with is 1x squared minus 25. What I hope you can see is that this can be further factored by a difference of squares, right? Two terms separated by a minus, I could square root each of these terms. So I put a square root over each of these. I would set up my two brackets. Do not forget to bring down that minus 2, or sorry, that 2. And then say to yourself, what's the square root of 1x squared? It will be 1x. What's the square root of 25? 5. One of your factors plus, one of your factors will be a negative. This one, factor out the 3. Then say, can that be further factored? And it can. It's a difference of squares. So bring down the 3, and your two factors are going to be 1x plus 2y, 1x minus 2y. Okay, you have this question here. This is a perfect square question, so can you guys just write perfect squares up here? We have not done. And I'm going to, I know you have enough room at the bottom of that worksheet. I want you to add a question. So we'll call it number 7. Okay. This would be your written response question. I give you something I give you something to factor. So it would say factor, and then it's going to be a trinomial. So let's just say it's x squared plus 9x minus 36. So you're like, okay, well, we've done this, right? How can I turn this into a written response question? So first, let's actually just quickly factor this. We are looking for, this is a PSA 1. So what gives us a product of negative 36 and a sum of 9? Anybody know what the answer would be? Negative 36. Do you guys have it? Let's see. Yeah, it'd be one of these. Do you know which one it would be? Yeah, the negative 3 plus 12 would give you 9. So negative 3 and 12. Okay, so then you'd say the answer would be x minus 3 and x plus 12. How something like this would be turned into a written response question is it would say something like verify that your factors are correct, not by expanding actually. Verify that your factors, that could be one thing, right, by expanding, but verify that your factors are correct. And then I'll say using the value of x is equal to 2. So verify that your factors are correct using the value of x is equal to 2. So Ainsley was absolutely correct. One thing I could do to verify, right, is I could have just re-expanded this, and if I get the original expression, I'm correct. But when they give you a value, x is equal to 2, where do they want you to put this 2? In every x you see. So what you would do is I would divide this, and the original expression was this, x squared plus 9x minus 36. So let's write that down. X squared plus 9x minus 36. I think that the factored answer of this was x minus 3 and x plus 12. How I'm going to verify that I factored correctly is I'm going to input a 2 or whatever value they give me into whenever I see an x. So we're going to put a 2 here. We're going to put a 2 there. So put a 2 in a bracket squared plus 9, 2 in a bracket minus 36. The reason why we put it in the bracket is because I could give you like a negative 2, and you'd have to make sure that negative is in the bracket, or else you get the entire question wrong. Because when you square a negative, the negative would disappear. Okay, so take out your calculators, and let's input this into our calculator and see what the output would be. So it was open bracket 2, close bracket squared, plus 9 times 2, and then minus 36. And I get negative 14. If I factored correctly, what should I get on this side when I input a 2? Do you know what I should get? Negative 14. Because remember, these two are the same. They're the exact same. This is just the expanded expression. This is the factored form. They're the same. I can go in between these two. So now we have to go to the factored form, and we have to input a 2 here, whatever the value they give you. So 2 minus 3, 2 plus 12. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. 2 plus 12 is 14. Negative 1 times negative 14, or sorry, negative 1 times 14 is negative 14. This is how you verify that you did it correctly, because you got the same answer in both your expanded form and your factored form. If you get a different number over here, let's say you got a 12, what does that mean? You factored incorrectly. Yes, that's what it means. Okay. All right, I'm going to talk about the worksheet now that you have. So it's going to be a lot of factoring questions that you're just going to practice, but this is the closest thing to what your exam will sort of look like. So this is the worksheet here. So again, the blank copies on the Google Classroom as well as the solutions. I'll tell you what we'll do together. So we're going to write in each box just what method of factoring we're going to do. We're going to put a 1 if it's a PSA 1. We're going to put a big 2 if it's a PSA 2. We'll put a difference of squares if it's a difference of squares. Then you're going to take out a sheet of paper and you are going to start wherever you want. You could go do your columns or you could do your rows, and you're going to factor. Because if you could factor these, you should get 100% on the quiz if you could factor these. Okay? And these aren't going to be challenging to factor. We've factored these before. The challenging thing is looking at it and being able to quickly decide inspection, decomposition, difference of squares, or GCF. That's what's the challenge. So start in your top left box, trinomial. Do you guys want to write a 1 or a 2? It's either a PSA 1 or a PSA 2. It's a 1. So just put a 1 here. What about this one? A 1. If there's a 1 in front, it's a PSA 1. This guy, put a 1. Just a big 1 here. Let me see if I'm able to even write. Okay, this one is PSA 1, PSA 1. What about this? It's a 2. You first say, can you get rid of the 12? You can't. There's no other GCF. You put a 2 here. This is going to be a decomposition. You're going to be breaking down that 25x. Okay, let's look at the second row. I'm going to pick different people, and you're going to tell me 1 or 2. So for the first one, Michaela, what would you say this is? 1. Yep, a 1 here. Sean, what would you say this is? It's a 2. Alicia, what would you say this is? It's a 2. You cannot get rid of that 10. Ainsley, what would you say this one is? A 2. This one I want you to star. It is going to be a 2, so write 2. There's a GCF first. So between a 6, a 21, and a 12, what's the GCF you could take out of this one? A 3. Yep. So write GCF 3. And then what you'll be left with is a PSA 2 question. Okay, this one we're going to do together. Negative 2x squared plus 32. So what do you guys think? Look at that one. Negative 2x squared. What would you do if you saw this? Okay, so GCF. So let's solve this one together. It's small enough we could do it right in the box. Oh, what do you think the GCF is? It is not 2. It is negative 2. If you start with a negative, you factor out that negative. Watch what happens when you do your division. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1x squared. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. And what is 32 divided by 16? Oh, I just said the answer. 32 divided by 2 is 16. Okay. Would I be done? No. It just turned into a difference of squares. Right here, 2 terms separated by a minus. This would then be a difference of squares. And bring in front that negative 2. So it's like you have to see things like that. Okay. This one here. Juan, what are you going to do to this guy? What's that? GCF. Yep, so write down GCF of 2, and then I bet you it's going to be a difference of squares. Okay, this one here. Aaron, starting with a 6, what do you think? PSA 2. This one here, Jackson, what do you think about this one? It looks like a PSA 2. It's a PSA 1, because why? You could take out a 4. So just write to remind yourself GCF and then write a 1. Carly, what about this guy? Nope, if it has a 1 in front, it's going to be a 1. Serena, this one, that will be a 2. Evan, this one will be a 1. Yes. Okay, let's look at this third row. 23 and a 2. Sean, what do you think? I don't know if I asked you, Sean. Sean, what do you think about this guy? 1 or 2? It's going to be a 2. Yep. Michaela, this one? 2. Yep. Let's do this one together. Negative 25x squared minus 45x. Let's see what happens. Negative 25x squared minus 45x. Aiden, if you saw this, what would you start with? Can't do difference of squares because you can't take the square root of 45. GCF. Okay, what do you guys think the GCF would be? Is it 5? It's negative 5. And can I take out a variable? An x. Okay, let's see what happens when we GCF a negative 5x out. We would get, what would we get? Positive 5x plus 9. You would look at this. Can you do anything more to this? Tristan, what do you think? If you get a 5x plus 9. Can you difference of square of it? Can you GCF further? Or are you done? What's that? You'd be done. There's nothing else you could do here. Okay? So then you'd box that in. That was just a GCF question. What's this one? Difference of squares. You could square root x squared. You could square root 1. Can you take out the 6 from all of these terms? Yes. Check if 48 is divisible by 6, and it is. It goes in 8 times. This would be a GCF, then a PSA 1. This guy, there's a 1 here. This is a PSA 1. This one, PSA 1. Jasmine, what do you think about this one? 2 terms separated by a minus. Difference of squares. Let's do this one together. Negative x squared plus 36. So what do you think? It's got to be factorable. We've got to do something with it. I can't do difference of squares right now because it's separated by a positive. Do you know what you could do? So that's a negative 1. If you start with a negative, you could always factor out that negative, even though it's a negative 1. So watch what would happen. If you say the GCF is negative 1, divide both sides by negative 1, and you would get 1x squared minus 36. Julius, what can you do with that? 2 terms separated by a minus. Difference of squares. So you'd have a -1 in front, and you would do a difference of squares here. This is going to be a GCF. Figure out what the GCF is. It's going to be a negative number, though. You're going to divide out. Put a 1 for here. You got a 1 in front, put a 1. Put a 2 here, because we can't divide out the 3, so put a 2 here. I'll let you guys try to figure that one out. This one's going to be a GCF. Let's see if we could figure out what the GCF would be. It would be 7. It'd be 7x. X cubed, x squared, x. GCF would be 7x, and then it would be a PSA 1. This guy, you do a GCF, and then check if it's a difference of squares. I think it would be. What about this one? I'm trying to think. 6, 4, and 2? Yeah, it'd be GCF. GCF of a 2, and then it'd be a PSA 2. You guys, this would be a GCF. See if you could figure out what the GCF would be, and then I believe it would be a PSA 1, and this would be a PSA 2. Okay? So what you're going to do until the bell rings is you're going to do as many of these as you can on a sheet of paper. Do as many as you want to practice for your test tomorrow. The answers are up here, except it doesn't say the method of factoring and there's no work, right? It just says what the answers are. So you do a few and then you could check your answers and see how you're doing.